Good evening, and welcome to tonight's event, a conversation with fourth-generation Russ and Daughters co-owners Niki Russ Federman and Josh Russ about their book, Russ and Daughters, 100 Years of Appetizing with fellow writer Joshua David Stein. We are delighted to have you all joining us today at the Stavros Niarchos Foundation Library. My name is Margaret, and I'm a librarian here at SNFL. Before I introduce today's speakers, I would like to thank the Stavros Niarchos Foundation for making programs like this evening's possible. I would also like to remind you that if you don't already have a library card, it is easy to get one by visiting any information desk in this building. To encourage you to visit NYPL's website and take a look at upcoming 7 Stories Up programs like this one. We would appreciate you joining us in this space again. The legacy of Russ and Daughters began in 1907 when Joel Russ, a Jewish immigrant from Eastern Europe, arrived in New York City. 4 generations later, the original Russ and Daughters continues to thrive on the Lower East Side with 3 more locations in this city. It is now my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Niki Russ Federman is the 4th-generation co-owner of Russ and Daughters. At the age of 27, she chose to return to the shop which she grew up. Together with her cousin Josh, she has grown Russ and Daughters into what it is today, while preserving its cultural and culinary legacy. Josh Russ Tupper was raised in an ashram in upstate New York and was working as an engineer in Portland, Oregon, when the opportunity arose to join his family business at 26. He has been leading Russ and Daughters with his cousin Niki ever since. Joshua David Stein is a cookbook and children's book author, journalist, and restaurant critic. His work includes Notes from a Young Black Chef and My America with Kwame Onwuachi, Ilbuko Stories and Recipes with Donna Leonard, the Nama Cookbook with Wilson Tang, and many more. Without further ado, please welcome Niki Russ Federman, Josh Russ Tupper, and David Stein. Thank you very much.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, everybody.
I'm Joshua.
I'm Niki.
I'm Josh.
They
Welcome.
stuck me
That's
in
the
between
difference.
so we could differentiate.
Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I am kind of going to be the interlocutor for Niki and Josh, and we're going to talk for a while, and then we're going to open up the floor for questions. I think most of you here, and most New Yorkers, or many New Yorkers, know the story and the significance of Russ and Daughters, but I was thinking to hear it from the 4th generation itself, maybe you could give a little overview of how Russ and Daughters came to be.
Sure. Russ and Daughters was started by our great-grandfather, Joel Russ, and he came over from a town in now Poland called Stryjew in 1907. His older sister sponsored him, as was done back then, to come over to help her with her herring business. Which actually was her husband's herring business until he decided to...
And by business, we mean a barrel of herring
Right.
on the street of the Lower East Side.
Right. Her husband decided to stop working and start studying the Torah. So she took over and needed some help, so she brought over her brother. And he then had his own herring barrel, and then a pushcart, and then finally a brick-and-mortar store. So we... date ourselves from 1914 when he opened the store. He then had 3 daughters and no sons. And in the mid-30s, he named the business Russ and Daughters. And there was the previous names, Russ's Cut Rate Appetizing, because how do you stand out? And at that time, there were many appetizing stores, even on the Lower East Side, I think 30. And apparently being cut rate was how you stood out. And that was a good thing. And then there was another name, J. Russ National Appetizing, and there was nothing national about his business.
But he knew in 4 generations, gold belly.
He
As
knew.
you would say today, he manifested.
Yeah.
Unless he sent someone to like the West Side once and was like, oh, it's a different country. And so then he named the business Russ and Daughters, which was amazing because it was the first business in the country to be named and daughters instead of and sons.
And if you think about it, even today in 2025, it is still incredibly rare to see a business that's and daughters.
Mm-hmm.
Not in the whole world. I mean, we don't know. But
I'm not sure.
well, we are in a library, so somebody could do the research. Yes. And please tell us.
So the daughters met their husbands, and our great-grandfather, his idea was they would meet their husbands and they would all work in the business. So there was a time where there were 3 couples working in just that little shop on the Lower East Side, which
was also half the shop.
It was
small.
now. Correct.
Yeah.
There was a renovation that we took over, like the bread shop. That was like another 3 feet. Is now the candy counter, as we call it. But we're still sort of. I can't really imagine having 3 couples running that one little business. But it was a family business. It was all family. So they did that for a while, and then our grandmother, grandfather were the last of the couples to own and run the business. And then Niki's father, after being a lawyer for a little while, came in the late 70s, and he thought he could be a lawyer and run the business, which last day he practiced law was the first day he worked at Russ Daughters. And him and his wife, Niki's parents, owned and operated the business for about 30 years, and then we took over in 2010. And since then, we've done a few other things.
I want to continue there, but does everyone know the difference between an appetizing store and a delicatessen? Yes? Okay.
Oh.
That is like a foundational and fundamental differentiation that we should delve into.
And I think this is a crowd of, this is our hometown crowd. But even still, there are many New Yorkers, so don't feel bad if you don't know, many New Yorkers who don't know this word appetizing. But that is actually the name of our food tradition. Appetizing is the sister food tradition to delicatessen. And both of these come from Jewish dietary laws, kosher laws, which prohibit the consumption of meat and dairy together. So on East Houston Street, it is not a coincidence that just a block apart you have Katz's Delicatessen and then Russ and Daughters Appetizing, because also people used to shop in a very sort of, you'd go to the specialist, you'd go to the delicatessen for your pastrami and corned beef, and you'd go to the appetizing store like Russ and Daughters for the fish and dairy. So think like...
Fish is kind of like the Switzerland of meat and dairy.
Yeah, it's neutral. So pickled herring with cream sauce and onion, right? So the fish and the dairy. Bagel and lox being kind of the most iconic of appetizing foods. And you get the smoked salmon, the dairy of the cream cheese, and then the bagel is the carb to kind of, is the vehicle. The word comes from the Yiddish word Vorspeis, which means appetizer, because these were foods, all the cured, smoked, pickled fish these were foods that were ready to eat if you were coming home from, and they were meant to be eaten at home, coming back from a shiva, or coming for a shiva, or coming from a wedding, or from synagogue. So they were appetizers. They were ready to eat. Most likely, a Yiddish speaker, someone like our great-grandfather, was trying to say appetizers and said appetizing, and then somehow that stuck. So the word, unfortunately, never kind of became part of the common lexicon the way that now we all say, a deli is like the bodega's a deli, So it was really very important to us, even just in the title of the book, to make sure that appetizing was right there on the cover, because we've really worked hard to bring this word into common knowledge. So now you're all kind of inducted into the appetizing club. You're not allowed to call us a deli, and you can You now have like a little trick up your sleeve if you want to break out some
But also-
New York trivia.
This food tradition is not something brought over from the old world. This is a New York food tradition, the appetizing store, which is also very interesting and important to understand.
Well, about New York, I mean, obviously, Russ Daughters exists within the Jewish food tradition, but it also, I think, it's just rooted in New York. It is like a New York, quintessentially New York location, and the Lower East Side has changed immeasurably over the last 100 years. And I was wondering if you talk a little bit about how, as a neighborhood changed, how Russ Daughters changed, you know, because both have evolved kind of in tandem.
Yeah, that's true and not true, because Russ and Daughters is really, we sort of hold true to the traditions of appetizing and try to stay the same as much as possible, but we definitely change. And, you know, the turn of the 20th century, the Lower East Side was the most densely populated area of the world with Jews and Italians and Germans. And it was bustling, and there were 30 appetizing shops. And you know, really had to, I don't know, work for those customers, but there was a ton of people there. And the Lower East Side has gone through some ups and downs. I mean, when Niki's parents took over in the late 70s, the Lower East Side was a rough spot. People were burning their own buildings to get insurance money, and no one was living in half the buildings down there. So we sort of stayed to what we were, and Mark would always be asked by customers, Niki's father, Mark, he's like, why don't you leave and move uptown? And he would say, no, they'll eventually, our customers will move back downtown, which is exactly what happened.
Or their kids.
Or their kids.
Moved back there.
Right, right. But, you know, that was the turning point. Even when I started in the early 2000s, kids would be living there and saying how they tell their grandparents they live on the Lower East Side, and the grandparents say, "Oh my God, what are you doing down there? That's such a dangerous place." They're like, "No, it's actually kind of the hot spot."
I think I was also thinking, like, you know, on Houston, on that block, you used to have a dairy, you used to have a bakery, you used to have all of these things. And as the neighborhood changed, not only appetizing's disappearing, but the bakeries, the dairies, Russ and Daughters has kind of brought all of that stuff in-house, sort of like ensuring a pipeline of supply, you know?
Yeah, ensuring a pipeline and ensuring that that there was a preservation of the taste continuity. And so even with something like bagels or bialys, you know, as much as bagels have become so popular, they've also become kind of dumbed down, right? Like, we all know it's actually hard to find a great New York bagel in New York. Yes. Except a few places. And now you can make it at home if you so choose. So a lot of the ways that Russ and Daughters has evolved has really has been born out of a very organic and a very deep desire to want to preserve this tradition and this culture, and looking around and realizing, well, the only way to do it is to do that ourselves. For example, we were not restaurateurs, but we saw increasingly that people were coming to Russ and Daughters wanting to eat at Russ and Daughters and have our food in situ, and the only thing we could do was to usher them outside to the two benches on East Houston, right?
But even the fact that they were ordering bagel sandwiches, I mean, for generations there weren't bagel.
We didn't make sandwiches.
Yeah, that was.
We didn't have bagels. And this was, I don't know, 40 years ago. Didn't sell bagels, and even when we started selling bagels, we still didn't make sandwiches. And now, if you're ever in Russ and Daughters, there's a lot of people ordering sandwiches, which is definitely a change.
Yeah.
But Joshua, back to your question about sort of the neighborhood and the meaning of the neighborhood, I think that is something that also we're very aware that we're sort of Russ and Daughters is a touchstone for a lot of people to connect with their own personal histories, and the neighborhood, the Lower East Side, and Russ and Daughters are inextricably linked, because together we're kind of a vehicle for people to retrace their own kind of immigrant roots. So many Americans, their stories start in these four, few square blocks. And so when we did decide that we wanted to open a restaurant to give people a place to sit down and have our food, well, I must say we almost made a big mistake originally, because at first it seemed obvious to us that, well, Russ Daughters has been on the Lower East Side for 100 years. If we're expanding, like, of course we would expand to a different neighborhood, like, obvious. And we were actually about to sign a lease for a space. I won't say what neighborhood. Well, I will. It was in Chelsea, and it was the night before we were going to sign this lease. And I remember I was starting to have I was just starting to feel very uncomfortable and
Verklempt.
Verklempt. No, I didn't. I do get verklempt a lot, but I wasn't. I was just like I just had an uneasy feeling. And I started talking to my husband about this, and as I'm talking to him, Josh called me, and he said, I don't know, I think this is the wrong idea. And as in that conversation, it actually became crystal clear that we were thinking about it all wrong, because in fact, the restaurant, Russ Daughters Cafe, had to be on the Lower East Side, because we wanted to, again, maintain this neighborhood to be a physical place where people could connect. And so we almost felt like an obligation to stay on the Lower East Side.
Yeah, and I'll say that I feel like the way that I came into the Russ Daughters orbit, obviously I've been in New York for many years, so I knew it, but I was a restaurant critic for the New York Observer. And when the cafe opened, I reviewed it, and as someone who grew up Jewish, but like with this weight of history, to see Niki and Josh open a restaurant which carries on that tradition, but without the weight, like they were creative, and it was so joyful and yet so true to what the DNA of the brand was. Like that, to me, DNA to what Russ and Daughters was, it really was so attractive and so hopeful. Like, and of course the food was amazing, and everything that you thought a natural extension of what an appetizing is, which they never had eggs, for instance. They never had plated food. And yet it felt so natural, and it felt like, oh, you guys are really adept and so comfortable with what Russ and Daughters is that you can move freely into the future. And sort of like the moment before you moved to Chelsea, like really trust yourselves to know what's right.
Well, from my perspective, the way that this relationship started was reading his review of. He was the restaurant critic for the New York Observer, and he was the first review of Russ and Daughters Cafe. And you have to as I said, neither one of us, we had the chutzpah to think that we could open a restaurant without having any restaurant experience. Like, I had never even bussed tables. And we definitely felt, you said we didn't feel the weight, but we felt the weight. We felt a lot of weight of not wanting to be the generation that killed our family's legacy. And we were actually very quiet about it until we basically opened. And everything was debated. We were building the plane as we flew it, and so then to read Joshua's review, I felt so validated and so seen, because he picked up. Not only is he a brilliant writer, but he just picked up on all the things that we had been, obsessing about. Yeah. And then there was a follow-up review that came out, or a follow-up article, and the title was, "Did I give Russ and Daughters Cafe 5 stars because of the Holocaust?"
Yeah, I wrote that too.
The answer is yes.
Yeah, I did do that. Just like, I just grew up with all of this is not the topic of the conversation, but I grew up with all of this weight surrounding Judaism and like being a Jew in America. And then really, was it the first in my life experience of like joyful, almost secular Judaism? Maybe not the first, but it was definitely, as an adult, it was something that I really resonated with. And I was so proud to be part of this community, which hadn't really been true for a long time.
And then my story of how the book happened was,
Yeah.
I'm sitting at the El Buco book party, which Joshua wrote, and I look over, and I've known him for years and seen him around, and he was like batting his eyes at me, and I knew exactly what he wanted.
Well, I mean, when I wrote that review, I also knew exactly what I wanted. I was like, okay, 10 years, we will write a cookbook. But yeah, I mean, so you did the cafe, then the bakery, then the 34th Street location. And even before that, when you first took over the OG, Russ Daughters, you renovated it too, quietly in a way. So maybe you guys can talk about how you do expand Russ Daughters in a way that still feels organic or honest or true.
Well,
and whether you've ever, have you ever made any missteps that you're like, oh, that actually wasn't the right move for us to make?
So in terms of expansion and thinking about changes to Russ Daughters, I'll talk about one change in the original store, and a lot of you have been there a lot. We had this reach-in refrigerator that was way too old to still be there, and it was small, and the doors didn't work, and we had all these shelves, and we really focused on selling the smoked fish in the case and stuff. So we decided we needed an open refrigerator. And there was lots of debates. As Niki said, in all of these decisions, we really debate a lot of friendly conversations, some not so friendly conversations that usually happen in the walk-in, which they don't last long because it's so cold. Or someone walks in trying to work, and we're like, all right. But we installed this big open refrigerator that you now all know on the opposite side of the fish case, and we were so frightened that we changed the look and the feel of the store. So I was, of course, interviewing like old customers that would come in. I'd be like, "What do you think of the new fridge?" And more than half of them were like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "We did it."
Yeah.
So in any change, we say innovation for Russ and Daughters is something that's indiscernible to you, because we've changed plenty of stuff. When I came in, we were writing orders by hand, and someone would call for their holiday order and say, "Give me the same order that I had last year." So we'd go down into the basement, find the alphabetized boxes, flip through the things, pull out the order, and write a new one. And I was like,
try to
was
decipher
blown.
the other person's bad
My
handwriting.
your father's handwriting, not easy to read, nearly impossible to read. So we've been changing all these technology and all this stuff, but we don't want you guys to see it. And yeah, there's changes. The wasabi infused flying fish roe is one of the newer items. It's only 30 years, been around 30 years.
And Mark's fascination with herring, with the different.
Yeah, but I mean, I think there actually, of course, there have been lots of changes, right? Yeah. For 100 years, there was just the original shop, and now there are 4 locations, and we have our own bakery and restaurants, and we, ship all over the country. And but I think there's a through line to all of it. And that's what's really important to us, is to provide that there's continuity of the taste and the quality, that there's continuity of the experience, and that we're always kind of sort of existing in this sort of liminal state where it's this in-between between the past and the present, between maintaining 100 years of tradition and history, and also making it
not being
relevant.
Schimmels.
What did you say?
And not being Jonas Schimmels. They're maintaining history, but they're still living 100 years ago.
Yeah. And so I think that's I think it's actually a fascinating challenge. It's one of the things that I love about my work, because I think it's easier to do one or the other. Like decide, okay, we're gonna stay the same, or oh, we're gonna, creative destruction. We're gonna blow this all up and be different. And for us, it's like the question is, how do you do both of those things at the same time? How do you stay the same and move it forward?
Right, because it's not like history stopped at a moment and like, oh, the real Russ Daughters was 50 years ago, and then that's what we're trying to preserve. No, every moment is inhabiting what Russ Daughters is.
It's like a human being. We're always developing and growing, hopefully, and learning and changing, ideally.
No solid, unchanging sense of self.
Exactly.
Yes. Something that I think was mentioned in the intro, but Locks is your inheritance in a way, but neither one of you had this as a destined career path. Even though, Niki, you grew up in the store riding the onion carts, but you went off. And Josh, you grew up in an ashram. So tell me a little bit about how important, if it was important, for you to make this, and for instance, your grandparents, Mark's, that generation, they didn't really have a choice. Like Joel really wanted them to work there. Mark got out, came back, and you're the second generation sort of loose free choice, free will. So tell me about like that journey away and then back.
Let me start. Well, it wasn't away and back. That's more Niki's story, but my mother was sort of the black sheep of the family and went off and did the hippie thing and raised me and my two sisters on an ashram until I was 10 years old. So I should have become a yoga teacher or something, right? But I rebelled, and I got a chemical engineering degree. And
You showed her.
Yeah. I went and worked as an engineer in the Pacific Northwest, and I heard at the time, I was sort of experiencing this introspection of where my family was from and who our grandmother is a real matriarch of our family, and was a real powerful figure for me. And what did she do with her life? And it was Russ Daughters. She was in Russ Daughters till she retired and beyond, and that's what she did. So that started becoming more present, and it wasn't never really that present when I was a kid. We'd go and visit it and go to Grandma's house or go to Niki's house and have a spread of food, which was great. So in that, in my introspection and thinking about that, I heard through the grapevine, which happened to be my mother, that Mark was looking for the next generation or someone to pass the business on to. And I gave him a call and said I'd leave my career and get involved for the first time, never been involved. And my story is I convinced him over the course of 4 months, but I think the real story is he was trying to get Niki to take over at that time. And when she finally said, I'm going to go explore my own path, Mark was like, all right, Josh, come back and try. And for every day for the next 5 years, he said, we're still trying. Like, no guarantees.
Because there was an overlap. I mean, you had to learn the business from the ground up.
He was totally involved in the business. I learned from him. And as I did, he stepped back a little more, I think, which allowed for Niki to be more free to come in without the imposing father figure.
And there was a big concern with Josh, not just that he didn't grow up with this, and my father was concerned that Josh had like romantic notions of what this is and had to tell him, like, no,
hilarious.
you're gonna work 6 days a week, you're gonna work on the counter.
So many conversations.
Yeah. But then he gets there and everyone gasps in horror because the one form of discrimination we admit, no, this sounds terrible.
No discrimination.
You can't be left-handed and work at Russ Daughters
with a knife in your left hand.
Because you cannot slice with your left hand. Because if you know our shop and we have the long counter, all the knives have to go in the same direction. So you can imagine if somebody's going this way and somebody else is going this way, we would have a lot of one-handed employees. And so all of a sudden Josh shows up and he's holding the knife in his left hand. No. And he not only learned how to slice with his right hand, which I can't even sign my name with my left hand, but he slices beautifully.
I can't sign my name with my right hand, but I can slice.
Yeah. And then you were
Yeah, I have
on a totally different path.
different story. I was a shop kid because my parents ran the shop. So Russ Daughters was a literal mom and pop for me, as my mother and my father. And I grew up, as a young kid, like just being annoyed, hanging around, waiting for them to finish, getting sent, to Moisha's, go get a roll of quarters, go get some extra ice gels from Katz's, getting given jobs. But also,
I love the image of Niki, in the early 80s, walking down Houston Street. Have you guys been on Houston Street in the early 80s? Did you have a bodyguard?
She
No,
was
but it
a
was-
sharp elbow. She was.
but people say like, oh, you don't remember what the Lower East Side was like? I'm like, yeah, I do, because I was a scared kid. Then you had all the punk, the hardcore punk people like going to CBGBs, but walking around Houston Street and the burning trash cans. It was
The glory days.
the glory days. So I sort of grew up in this small store, and as much as I probably complained I wanted to go home, I also was observing and absorbing that there was something magical happening in this space, the way in which every New Yorker passed through those doors, and by extension that the whole world was, came into this store. And I thought until, sort of embarrassingly, until I was much older, that when you walk into a shop, of course you hug and kiss the shop owner, because that's what happened in our family store. And but that being said, I was encouraged to do anything but Russ and Daughters, right? I mean, there's very much an ethos of that we are sort of expected to do something quote unquote better than what our parents did. And so I certainly thought like, oh man, if I end up doing what my parents, my grandparents, and my great-grandparents did, then like I'm a failure. And so I, with that, I kind of, it took me about 7 years after college to kind of go and do the different careers that I thought I was supposed to be doing, because they were, sort of more prestigious.
Is that an Old Testament thing, the 7-year journey?
Yeah. I was like
I think it's 40 years in the Bible, but
Right. I was like the prodigal daughter. And when I got to the bottom of the list, because I was always, nothing stuck. And partly because none of the jobs felt real to me. And when I got to the bottom list, and frankly, I didn't know what I was going to do, I started to take stock and think about what does Russ and Daughters actually mean to me? And I realized that, in fact, again, I shifted my whole perspective and realized that actually being part of a legacy, in Yiddish you would say a yichus, being part of this lineage is quite a rare thing, especially in our, in American, in this country. We don't have a lot of history. We don't tend to hold on to things or, preserve craft.
And you wanted more kissing.
I wanted to kiss strangers all day long.
Your husband, however, did not.
And I realized that, back to this idea that I realized that just because this place was 100 years old didn't mean that it needed to be stagnant. And in fact, it couldn't be stagnant, because stagnation is death. I could figure out a way to preserve the jewels, the essence of what this is and what needed to be preserved, but also put my own stamp on it. And just thinking about New York and that we all accept as New Yorkers that this is a city of constant change. And we accept that, building comes down and the next day we don't remember what was there, and then something sparkly, goes.
We fight it, but
We fight it, we
ultimately
gripe.
we accept it.
But I think it's the places that are, and the the places that are able to survive become sort of so enmeshed with our identity, and we rely on them to give us this sense of stability and continuity and community. And I realized that that's a really beautiful thing, and I sort of felt called to it.
Yeah.
So I came back, so then I called my father and said, "Hey, your prodigal daughter wants to return." And he said, "Well, that's great, but now your cousin's involved, so you got to talk to this guy." But luckily, we talked and realized pretty quickly
We came to an understanding.
Well, we did. I mean, our understanding was actually that we realized we saw the same things we wanted. We had shared the same values for Russ and Daughters. So.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions that I always think about, and I think the book, which is for sale, does a good job of identifying is like, yeah, what is the core, like, Russ and Daughters DNA? Like, what, if you can put into words what Russ and Daughters, the core essence of it, you know?
Very difficult thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking, like, when I was asking that question, I think to me, part of it is, you know, I think it happens a little less or differently now, but, you know, for part of the book, I interviewed a lot of regulars, and obviously I heard stories from you, like this exchange with the slicer and the customer and the slicer. Like, it's not just a pure, give me a half pound of that. It's like, oh, give me a good fat herring, you know, like, oh, that's a little, you know, just like this back and forth. And that, like, sense of real community, and like, both sides know what's up, and it's not just a capitalist exchange of goods and services. Like, there's something really there. And then there are so many parts of writing the book that, as an outsider, I had no idea about, like the intricate choreography of the slicers, you know, because it's this long, narrow counter, and there's a lot of knives, and there's a lot of people, and then slicers are jumping from area to area. And if you go and you spend time there and you watch, it's like beautiful choreography where one arm will be weaving through an armpit into, like, getting herring or whatever. And to my knowledge, not that many people have gotten cut apart. And it's like, and, you know, people go in and they have their favorite slicers. And that, to me, seems so rare in my experience, like, you know, in stores. Like, so often it's just transactional. And yeah, Russ and Daughters is a functioning store, and it's transactional for sure, but there is also this tackiness, this, like, stickiness between humans that happens.
Yeah, we like to call that the Russ and Daughters experience, and good luck describing it, but Joshua and our conversations created, and you put it on paper, this Russ and Daughters experience in a book. And, you know, this is more than a cookbook. It's something that we hope you can all take into your homes and bring a piece of Russ and Daughters with you. And the greatest thing that I heard that really exemplifies this is we were in San Francisco doing an interview with KQED, and this woman was, like, sort of describing the Russ and Daughters experience and say it's so amazing. And then she says, "I've never been there." And I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
She's like, "Yeah, the book just laid it out so beautifully." I was like, "Wow, amazing."
We did it.
It is this ineffable thing that's very hard to describe. But when I'm, you know, helping to train and welcome new employees, I tell them early on, you have to appreciate that people are coming here for more than the food. So yes, it's about the food, and we have to maintain the quality and the excellence in the way we do things, and you're going to learn all that, but you need to understand that it's more than the food. This is how people connect to who they are and where they come from. And sometimes it can come out. There's a way in which, and you know, probably a lot of you feel this way, I hope, is like a sense of ownership that, like, this is Russ and Daughters, that's my place, you know. Sometimes it comes out in off-putting ways because people feel this sense of, like, you know, entitlement and ownership, and so that can be hard. For example, like for the hosts at Russ and Daughters Cafe, you know, when they're telling, we don't take reservations, and so they have the job of telling people, you know, on a busy, you know, Saturday like, it's going to be about an hour. And sometimes people get very upset.
Yeah.
And it's not just because there's a wait. It's because they're like,
That's my
coming.
Russ Daughters.
Yeah, and they're coming. Sometimes they're coming, for very personal reasons. This just happened yesterday. Somebody texted me, and she was kind of annoyed because she didn't remember that, now we're not, the restaurant isn't open for dinner. We keep it, reserved for like private events. So at night it's closed unless we're doing a party or something. And she came at night and she was like, I can't believe it wasn't open. I said, yeah, we close at 4. And she was kind of annoyed. And then I found out that she wanted to come because it was her mother's yard site. And she and her mother there was a picture of it that she sent me of her and her mom. One of their last meals together was at the cafe. And so she wanted to come, and she wanted to have matzo ball soup. And she wanted to try to sit the same booth. And so it was alien. It was, she felt an affront that sort of connection that she was hoping to have with her mother's spirit we weren't able to do that for her in that moment.
But I think it's like you said that they come for the food, but they also come to know where they're from and who they are. But I think a big change in Russ Daughters too is that the clientele. It has always been a wide swath. Maybe probably in the beginning it was like people in the block radius, but now like just anyone who's been there, it's like it's filled with people, and a lot of people who are not from New York, a lot of people who aren't Jewish, like everyone in the world. So it's not. Sometimes it's not so much, hey, this is where you're from, as a representation of, it. I think Russ Daughters began as like an in-group restaurant or in-group store, and now it's much broader and wider. And something that I like about the experience is it's both of those things, and it doesn't. It's not like a theme, like Jewish theme park, and it's not totally. For the delectation of goys, it's not that, and it's not just a totally closed system either. It feels true to itself in both ways.
I remember my father being genuinely concerned that all of our customers were dying, and how was Russ Daughters going to continue, and he grew up with this mentality that, we're a Jewish store serving Jewish food to Jewish customers in a Jewish neighborhood.
That's when he sold us the business. Like, here you go.
And what I love and feel so proud of and just love being, a part of is the fact that now Russ Daughters has transcended that without forgetting where we come from. But now Russ Daughters is a New York place, and this is New York food. And whether you live here or whether you're visiting, it's a touchstone for anyone who wants to kind of, be rooted in this town.
Yeah. I think to me, just being there a lot, is like the other thing that I think is challenging now a little is, I don't know if you guys experience this, but people will come in and they'll kind of be ordering. They saw it on TikTok or they saw it on Instagram, and it's like, so they'll have like an everything bagel with lox and the works, which is great, like great order. But it's also like, yeah, you want them to really engage, and like that's to me the magic is the human to human. And I watch those interactions, and I think 9 times out of 10 there is some little moment that is that, and that little moment is enough to build on. Yeah.
Joshua spent a lot of time standing in the corner of the shop watching.
And I even tried slicing, which is extremely difficult. Okay, I think that it's time for some questions. Yes, I see the hands. I think people will be coming around with mics.
Thank you for everything you do, which is remarkable. But I did have one question for you. I've been to all of your locations, and you had opened a cafe at the Jewish Museum. And I took some of my cousins there, and then the pandemic came, and the cafe closed. Did you not reopen because of the pandemic, or was there some other reason that related to you feeling maybe you had gone too far afield, or were there other factors?
Yeah, so we had Russ and Daughters at the Jewish Museum on 5th Avenue and 92nd Street. It was a beautiful space, and we were there we had a 5-year agreement with the museum. And actually, it was the museum that, wanted us to be there. Anyway, it was so 20. COVID happens, and our agreement came up right during peak COVID times, and it was just at the time when, especially for restaurants, I mean, it was just apocalyptic. Restaurants we were one of the hardest hit industries, because as you can imagine, you can't run a restaurant and serve food through Zoom. And so we went from being a family business that never laid off anyone, that thought and made decisions in terms of looking down not just the next year or decade, but the next generations ahead. All of a sudden with COVID, we were just trying to get through each day, and at one point it actually did look kind of existential for us, and we projected that if things kept sort of imploding the way they were, Russ and Daughters had maybe 6 months to continue. So it was right at that time where for us we were committed. We said, our great grandfather went through the Spanish influenza of 1918. So COVID was our second pandemic. Our grandparents went through, they went through the Depression. They went through World War II. My father, and mother went through running the store during 9/11, right? So we accepted that COVID was our sort of generation's challenge, but we were going to do whatever it took to make it through. And so part of that was we said, okay, we have to get as scrappy as possible. So we went from having 150 employees to having 50 employees, and just doing everything. And every shipping order that came in was like, thank you. We were doing deliveries through to all the hospitals and senior centers. So it was a COVID closure, but it also kind of helped to keep us lean and get through those times. And then when we reopened, we were kind of like, I don't know, maybe we just have a downtown gravitational pull,
I feel like we didn't go too far afield, but there were other challenges as well as COVID that, in shrinking and being dynamic and making sure that the business was thriving, it was the best decision to not reopen that.
Hi. Oh, dedicated eater for over 60 years. Good to see you. We haven't mentioned the dried fruit and rum cordials, but thank you. They're the most brilliant things in the world. Go over to the other side when you're downtown, everybody. Who came up with hot smoke, cold smoke? This is the greatest thing I've ever eaten in my life.
So hot smoke, cold smoke, the recipe is in the book. It's a combination, it's a spread, or, in appetizing speak, it's a salad, even though it's not a green salad, but, it's kind of in the category of whitefish salad or eggplant salad. So hot smoke, cold smoke. It's a combination of hot Scottish salmon, which is a hot smoked salmon, and kippered salmon. Oh, sorry. Scottish salmon is a cold smoked salmon, and kippered salmon is a hot smoked salmon. And then there's, mayo and shallots and sour cream, and it's delicious. We developed that for the cafe. And then the funny thing was, as soon as we opened the cafe, people were coming up the block to the shop wanting to buy hot smoke, cold smoke, to take home. And we said, oh, we're so sorry. We only make that at the cafe. And then people would look at us like, really? And then we realized pretty quickly, like, that was a very,
Yeah,
that made
that
no
went out for
sense.
too long.
Yeah.
We're like, whoa, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So now we make it and sell it everywhere. And it's delicious, and especially with the bagel chips. So.
And as a follow-up to that, talk to us a little bit about the actual recipes. Like, what are your favorite recipes in the book? Because when you think about an appetizing store, you think, well, you get the lox, you get the bagels, you get the cream cheese. You don't need a cookbook. You just put it all together. So what are your favorite recipes in the cookbook?
Yeah, it was interesting. Maybe before we had the restaurant, a cookbook might have not been a thing to do because there's not a ton of recipes in the appetizing store. There's salads. We have a guide for smoked salmon. We have a guide for herring, a guide for caviar, which is a significant, important part of the book. When it's great to give people that may not know an understanding of those things. But then with the restaurant, there's a lot of recipes. There's 100 recipes in there. So some of my favorites, I love our kasha varnishkas at the cafe, and I eat it way too often. And now I even cook it at home, which seems strange, but I do. The blintzes are a really easy, simple recipe, but you can go as crazy as you want and like go make babka or bagels, which could take you 2 days and a few to 10 tries to get them right. But there's a lot of great recipes in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and Joshua, I don't know what you would say, but I think this was a really fun, we had a great time making this book. But one of the, not a challenge, but one of the sort of interesting things that we had to kind of unlock was how we were going to structure it. And it was not so obvious because Russ Daughters is not just a restaurant where you could do like, okay, here are your appetizers and mains and desserts. And when we finally landed on that the recipes would kind of mimic the evolution of Russ and Daughters. So we start with the store and the recipes that come from the shop. And then we move on to the cafe, and we have all the sort of dishes that we developed at the cafe and the cocktails and the, and the desserts and then our bakery and, how we, the bagels and the rugelach and that kind of, I think, really, once we kind of figured that out, I think everything kind of we were able to slot it in easily.
Yeah, I mean, as an author, it's kind of like, it was important, and we did it in the proposal stage, like you figure out the infrastructure of the book, and then when you start doing the book, things flow into it. If you don't have that structure right the first time, it gets messy and it doesn't make sense. I mean, to your question about the recipes, like, I grew up avoiding latkes because when I was little, I think my dad, in some mistaken joke, I hope it was a joke, told me that what makes latkes so good is that my grandmother would grate her knuckles into them. Just such a messed up thing to say to a kid. But I was like, but it makes sense when you look at a box grater. I was like, yeah, that's probably true. And they're a little pinkish anyway. But so to have the latke recipe in this book rekindled my love for knuckleless latkes. So that's mine.
I have to say, though, my favorite recipe in the book is probably not the one that anyone would expect. And it's also technically not an appetizing recipe because it's a meat dish. But it's Aunt Ida's stuffed cabbage. And Aunt Ida was the middle of the 3 Russ daughters. And she was the one who broke away and didn't want to be under the thumb of her father. And she left the business. But she made a mean stuffed cabbage. And growing up, visiting, when the 3 daughters would get together, so our grandmother and her 2 sisters, these were the original Golden Girls. And I just remember just sitting at the table and watching these 3, just the kibitzing that would happen. And she made this delicious stuffed cabbage, except she passed away without ever writing down the recipe for the stuffed cabbage. I wanted a way, but I wanted Aunt Ida to be part of this book, metaphorically speaking. And so I took it upon myself to try to recreate her stuffed cabbage. And I did it by connecting with her son, who's now in his 80s, and he lives in California.
And he sells pipes.
And he sells pipe, and he's a pipe monger. He had a great pipe store. And I called him up, and he, together he was trying to we were trying to remember and piece it together. And then I also spent time in the stacks at the American Jewish Historical Society, which has a whole archive of Jewish cookbooks. And so I was looking through these books for, like the Hadassah Ladies of Rochester from 1955, and so together, and then I started just making, version after version of version, and I would ship it to California, and Marty would be waiting for it, and then he'd eat it, and then we'd talk on the phone, like, no, it has to be a little bit more tangy, and like use a different raisin. You need a little bit, and finally when the day he ate it and said, and the memories of his mom started coming back, that's when we knew that was it.
Great. Yeah. Are we at time? We have time for one more.
Hi. Do you view yourself as in competition with other similar New York businesses? Does that kind of attitude govern the way you conduct your business or expand your business?
No. There's a few other appetizing stores and even fewer like actual appetizing stores, like Barney Greengrass, Sable's. New York is such a big place that we don't see it as a competitive thing. Certainly if we're talking about prices or looking at things like that, we would do some research and see what other people are selling or charging for things. But there's never, I think in some ways, when Niki's father ran the business and and our grandfather ran the business, they used to go to the smokehouse. I think they would encounter like the Zabar's guys and maybe there's some banter, maybe
it was
colorful banter. But no, we don't see the competition. What we see as potential competition, but not really, is just the growth of Jewish food businesses. And I think a lot more people. There's a lot more offerings and bagel shops or different things trying to do some of what we do.
I think also we have an appreciation for the places and the families and the businesses that have been able to stay and to survive, because we know what that takes and what you have to give up and to do that. And so there's sort of mutual admiration, I think, and especially for multi-generational businesses. In this country, less than 1% of family businesses make it to a fourth generation. So anytime we meet anyone, whether they're in the food world or construction or there's sort of this like sort of joy, or appreciation of the it's a unique quote unquote club to be
it's
part
a secret
of.
Society. Don't tell anyone.
It's just in the name of every fourth generation.
Can we take one more? Because I
The question is about chopped liver. And the question is, she loves it, but how does it fit into appetizing?
It doesn't.
It doesn't. But
Thank you so much.
We have some. We transgress. We have a few.
The appetizing tradition was born out of kosher law. Our great-grandfather came over here and was never kosher. His business was never kosher. We called ourselves for years, and still we're kosher style. But we're not kosher, clearly, because we have chopped liver. Yeah. So it does not fit into a, We have a rabbi that says
It's okay. It's okay. Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Niki and Josh, and the
Thank
New
you,
York Public
everyone.
Library and the whole team here.